And we proudly present interviews with the musicians that matter. Our special guest today is Tony Kaye, keyboardist, who was an original founding member of the band Yes, and was with several other bands, and currently with the band Circa. Welcome, Tony.
Hi, Craig. Good to be here.
Oh, it's our pleasure to have you speaking with us today. If you don't mind, we'll walk down memory lane and bring us up to the current time. Can you tell us a little bit about your background originally when you were young, when you were Anthony John Selvage?
Well, that's a long time ago, but I'll give it a shot. Well, of course, I started classical piano, with one of my grandmother, my father's mother, who was a concert pianist, and she put me on her knee and sat me at the piano, and the rest is history. I was going to, study classical music. In fact, I did till I was 17, and then I was going to go to the Royal School of Music, and suddenly rock and roll took over.
Wow, and what influences came in at that point that made you say,
Well, of course, we were listening to a lot of American music, a lot of American blues, and at that time, traditional American traditional jazz. And I started listening to a lot of records and got influenced by people like Jimmy Smith and Jimmy McGriff and the great blues players. And I played actually clarinet at the time too. It was a second instrument that you had to go to the Royal School of Music, and I actually played clarinet in a traditional jazz band. And I went from there, started playing piano with a big band orchestra, 16-piece orchestra in my hometown, and played, Basie and all the great, big band influences from the 30s and 40s. And that kind of got me into playing live on stage with, with a big band, which was quite a thing when you're 15, 16 years old. And then I joined a blues band in my hometown and went to Europe, and it became apparent that I was actually going to be a musician in a rock and roll band.
Oh, I see. So you were you're playing out and around, and you actually got to travel around Europe, having grown up in England. Was it Leicester?
I'm sorry, was it what?
I said having grown up in Leicester in England, right? And then
Right.
you got a chance to travel about.
Yeah, a long way from Paris and Germany. But actually, in the early 60s, Germany was really the place that a lot of English bands, including the Beatles, of course. And in fact, one of my early memories, one of the first times I went to Germany, with a band, we were actually playing opposite the Beatles, who were then called the Silver Beatles, in a club in Hamburg.
Wow, what a memory that must be.
Yeah. I remember going over to the club after doing one of our sets, and there was the Silver Beatles in black leather, looking like James Dean and. And they were amazing then. Even back then, they were. Of course, Ringo wasn't in the band at the time, but they were an amazing band even then. And of course, I was more of a Rolling Stones fan. Actually, you either sort of became a Beatles fan or a Rolling Stones fan in those days. And I love the blues, so the Rolling Stones were my favorite.
Right, so you kind of moved away from that toward the blues, actually. And what was the process that brought you together with Chris Squire, John Anderson, and Peter Banks and Mabel Greer's Toy Shop? How did that go?
Well, actually, I was living in London and I just moved to London, actually, and I frequented a pub, a club on Wardour Street, next to the famous Marquee Club, and it was a sort of meeting place for musicians. That were actually trying something different. I mean, the Rolling Stones, of course, in the early days played the Marquee Club, a lot of bands, but, people like Keith Emerson, who had a band called Nice at the time, and musicians that were sort of trying something new, progressive music, as it later became. And in this club, I met Chris and John, and they were talking about, getting a band together, and that was really the beginnings of Yes. Of course, we later started a residency at the Marquee Club. I think every Tuesday night, and Keith Emerson and the Nice were Wednesday, and it started from there.
Wow, what a great time! Certainly.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So I guess was Bill Bruford originally with the band, or was he kind of an acquisition when you guys started to come together?
He was not the original drummer, but he eventually joined the band and then left to go study economics, I think, at Leeds University. And we had another drummer, but we really wanted Bill. And actually, we went up and played a gig at the university in Leeds, and managed to talk Bill into rejoining the band. So
wow,
he left his studies and came on the road.
Well, that really reshaped his life as well. When did
sure.
How did it move from Mabel Greer's toy shop to Yes?
Well, that was the band that Chris had. John had his own band in his hometown, and they were called the Warriors, with of course Ian Wallace, now departed, who was an amazing drummer, a bass player called David Foster, who eventually was in my band after first time that I left Yes, when I formed Badger. And David was a co-writer with John, and on Time and a Word and the early Yes albums, and we teamed up and formed Badger later. And so it was a very, all the musicians were hanging around together. We all knew each other.
Right. So everybody came together. You guys formed Yes. There was Yes's first album. How was that receivve? The first album.
Well, we were just starting. It was recorded, I think, on an 8-track in a very, very small studio. Everything, of course, was played live, and I think the album may have taken 2 or 3 days to record.
Wow.
So it was a humble beginning, of course, and we signed with Atlantic Records, and at that time, record companies stayed with the band and went through the beginnings of getting the band together and finding out what we could do musically. We were playing versions of a lot of different people's songs. We played Beatles songs and of course, No Experience Necessary with Richie Havens, and
a great version, by the way.
Doing our own arrangements. And fortunately, Atlantic Records stuck with us, and it was really the Yes album, our third album, that that we started to get some recognition. So it took a while.
Right. And I understand that you helped compose Yours Is No Disgrace, the first song on that album, which is one of my personal favorites, albums and songs.
Right. Yeah. So that time we were rehearsing at what became Steve Howe's house down in the West Country, and it was Steve had just joined the band, and we were trying to figure out what the next album was going to be, and sitting around playing music. Yours Is No Disgrace was one of the first things we did, and I had the intro, the instrumental part that became the beginning of Yours Is No Disgrace, and of course John and Steve wrote the song.
Yeah, it was quite a quite a thing for me musically, at any rate, and I play it now whenever I need to hear it. Certainly.
Good.
No question. The first three albums were excellent, and the third album, as you said, I think the Yes album was perhaps the signature album to that point in time, and some would argue of all time. So, at what point did Yes and you part company, and the circumstances?
Well, the Yes album started getting recognition, and we were able to come over to the States, and we supported people like Alice Cooper and Jethro Tull, and various bands that were doing very well and playing big concerts, and I was very influenced by a lot of American music, and completely enamored with America. And it served as a little bit of a rift in what I was wanting to do with the band, and my influences, and of course at that time the band, one of my favorite bands, was very prolific and loved their music, and so my influences started getting a little broader in terms of American music, and I knew it was the place that I wanted to be.
Right. So things kind of changed, and then they went on to do Fragile, and I don't know if you contributed to it, but Rick Wakeman, I guess, had kindly stepped in.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and
right.
Certainly put Yes on a different track. They were destined to do great things, and Fragile and Close to the Edge, came after that.
Right, and they were very different. They were very different, sweet-like, long, indulgent sort of things, I would say, rather than the songs that you had done with Yes.
Right, yes. They progressed. They spent a lot of time in the studio, of course, with Eddie Offord, who was very instrumental in a recording process that now seems to be the norm, because now we have digital recording. But he was instrumental in chopping up tape and putting sections together, and it became more of an experimental time in the studio. Of course, the Beatles had done that on an 8-track level, recording Sgt. Pepper, really.
Right. So it was a great time of change. So at any rate, what took you from 1971, where you kind of went off and did some other projects and things, to 1983, when you had found Yes again and Yes had found you again? What was the process there?
Well, I decided to, I had Badger, and we recorded 2 albums. The second one in New Orleans, spent some time in New Orleans with Alan Toussaint. And it was very much more of an American blues-type album. And I got to spend time here in certainly one of my favorite cities, in a musical sense, particularly. I got very influenced with American music, and decided that the great decade of London was over, and decided to move to the States. And
So that's when you made your move?
It was very. I'd only been here, I think, 4 or 5 months, and I joined up with David Bowie for the Station to Station tour.
Wow, and that was quite an experience.
In 1975 for 2 years. So that was. Yes was left behind at that point. And after David, of course, I played with Badfinger and a local band here called Detective, which was signed to Swan Song, and Led Zeppelin kind of oversaw what we were doing, and. But it was really with Badfinger because we were recording a Badfinger album in Miami, and just as it happened, the drama incarnation of Yes hit town, and actually I was living in a house on Key Biscayne next to Chris's wife and children. So I went to see the concert, came back, everyone came back to the house, and Chris and I started talking, and he had this idea of making a new band. Actually, not Yes, but, before it became Yes again for 90125, it was actually a band called Cinema.
Right.
With Trevor Rabin singing. And we rehearsed. Trevor lived here also in Los Angeles, and we both went over to London and rehearsed what became 90125 for 9 or 10 months. Went into the studio with Trevor Horn and recorded the album. And then John came to the studio and decided that he really liked the band and redid the vocals on it.
Yeah,
and it became a huge album for Yes.
Yeah, no
and changed
doubt.
our lives.
Yeah, it was interesting because again, Yes had different performers, and again they took a different direction, not completely different, but a different tack on things. And the Trevor Rabin influence instead of Steve Howe was much different, I thought. How are they different to work with?
Well, I hadn't really worked that much with Steve. We
it was more Peter Banks
did the
originally,
album and then went on tour. But it was, they're very, very different guitar players. And Trevor came into the band and was, really picked out by Chris because of the songs that Trevor had. And obviously on 90125, it was very much Trevor's material, although we co-wrote quite a few songs in rehearsal. He was very much the instigator of that album.
Right. So 90125, big hit, and then what?
Well, of course, 90125 was a huge success, and we were on the road for 2.5 years, or maybe longer. And then, of course, we recorded a follow-up, Big Generator, in Europe, and went on tour with that. And that was another 2 years. And John decided that he wanted to do something different, so the band kind of went on to a hiatus at that point, and came back, of course, with the Union album.
Right. The Union, where it was everybody, it was in the round, and it was a massive musical talent on the stage.
An amazing time. I don't think anyone really realized what it was going to be, including record companies and managers. And it just worked, because people were interested in seeing everyone from the past, really, apart from Peter Banks, playing together, and it was a really fun time. Actually, I enjoyed that tour.
So what after that? the 5 years of touring, from what you were saying, 2.5 years for 90125, 2.5 years. And then what did you decide to do after that?
Well, after the Union tour, people went their own ways, and John was doing his thing. John is the singer of Yes, and was very, very much instrumental in whatever it became, of course. And there was kind of two factions: the East Coast Yes and the West Coast Yes. And it sort of dissipated, because we didn't know how to carry on without John, and John was doing his thing. And in 1974, Trevor had set up his first digital recording studio here in Los Angeles, and we started work really precipitated by Trevor and John getting together.
Was that 1984?
What turned out to be the Talk album.
Ah, okay. Was that 1984, did you say, Tony?
And of course, the band came back together, and we went on tour with the Talk tour, and in 75, 76.
Okay.
And I'd had enough at that point and left.
Right. So
as did Trevor too. Trevor left the band then.
Right. So bring us up to the last decade. What's with Tony Kaye at the moment?
Well, I went into retirement and taught tennis on the Cayman Islands.
Wow.
I'd had enough of touring and decided to be in one of the places that I loved and doing something that I really loved, which was playing tennis. So I kind of retired.
So you'll see perpetual change.
Oh yeah.
In other words, yeah.
And then Billy Sherwood, who had toured with the Talk tour as a keyboard player, guitar player, singer, do everything guy, called me up and kind of pulled me out of retirement to do a couple of albums that he was working on, which were tribute albums to Pink Floyd.
Wow.
One of my all-time favorite bands, and we did Dark Side of the Moon and The Wall, and just kind of got me back into playing Hammond again.
Wow. And then you did a tour, didn't you, called Yoso?
Well, that was later. We, at the end of doing those albums, Billy was making a lot of different tribute albums with a lot of different musicians, and we were sitting around the studio going, well, maybe we should write some sort of Yes-type material and see what happens. And we phoned Alan, and actually Trevor. It was actually pre-Circa. It was going to be a band called Family. And asked them, Trevor had written a couple of songs, and so we started recording. And eventually Alan joined the band, which was then called Circa. And we went on from there. Alan, of course, left the band to rejoin the later incarnation of Yes, and we continued making albums. In fact, we just released our third Circa album called And So On.
Congratulations. What was the title again? I'm sorry?
It's called And So On.
Okay, And So On, sure. Very good. So that's exciting news. To backtrack for a second, what was your thought when some of the Yes guys got together? John wasn't well. They found a tribute band singer up in Canada, and they kind of went off. And then John recovered, and they kept off. And and John kind of was left to do his own thing and pulled himself together, made a tour, and then is touring with Rick Wakeman.
You're right. Yes. I mean, I don't think that that John was that interested in intensive touring. He obviously had a medical scare, and John, being John, doing his own thing, and he's always been close with Rick. So it was. It was a situation that I think, was more to John's liking in doing it his way rather than the complicated, going on tour with a band, and continues to do, his solo thing. But of course the band went on to, get another singer, and they continue. The Yes continues.
Right. I guess that's kind of been the history of it over 30 some years. Changing.
Sure. Yeah, I'm not sure that you can actually do it without John.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the present incarnation of the band, but lead singers are kind of important, and John was very much the instigator in Yes, and I think they sadly sorely miss him.
Yeah, it's definitely a different feeling there. So, in the last few minutes, can you tell us, Tony, what's next for Tony? What's going to be? You going to continue with Circa? Are you going to tour? What's the story?
We're touring right now. We just got back from doing some gigs in Mexico, doing the new album, and we're playing here in Southern California in about 2 weeks. And we're working. We go to Japan in November, and to the East Coast of the States in late December.
Great. You'll have to come visit us in the Philadelphia, New Jersey area.
Yeah, we will try.
Yeah, that would be terrific. Thanks for taking a moment out of your busy schedule, Tony, to meet with us here at Rowan Radio 89.7 WGLS FM and being one of the musicians that matter. Thank you, Tony.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Kaye.
Thanks again. Be well.
Okay. All right. Thanks.